Maria Delgado stared at the faded photograph in her hands. The edges were worn from years of careful handling. In the picture, a 17-year-old girl held a tiny baby boy. That girl was her, 32 years ago. The baby was the son she had never stopped thinking about. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window of her small house in Tucson. At 49, Maria had built a good life for herself. She worked at Roosevelt Elementary School as a counselor, helping kids who were struggling. Her colleagues respected her. The parents trusted her. But there was always an empty space in her heart that nothing could fill. She had never married. There had been relationships over the years, good men who cared about her. But whenever things got serious, she would pull back. How could she explain to someone that part of her heart belonged to a child she gave away? How could she build a family when she had given up her first child? The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. Maria looked at the caller ID. It was Detective Rivera, the private investigator she had hired 3 months ago. Her heart started beating faster. "Hello, Detective Rivera," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maria, I have news, good news. Can you sit down?" Maria was already sitting, but she gripped the kitchen table anyway. "Tell me." "I found him. I found your son." The words hit her like a wave. After all these years of wondering, of imagining, of hoping. She had dreamed of this moment so many times, but now that it was here, she could barely breathe. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I'm sure. His name is Jake Thompson. He's 32 years old, lives in Phoenix. He's a computer programmer. Works for a big tech company. Married his college sweetheart 2 years ago. No kids yet, but they're trying." Maria closed her eyes. Jake. Her son's name was Jake. She tried to picture him, but all she could see was the tiny baby she had held for just 3 days before the adoption papers were signed. Does he know he's adopted? Yes. His adoptive parents told him when he was young. "They're good people, Maria. They raised him well. But here's the thing that might interest you. His wife told me that Jake has been having these strange dreams lately. Dreams about the desert, about Native American ceremonies, about a woman he's never met." Maria's breath caught. She thought about her own grandmother, who used to tell stories about dreams that connected family members across great distances, about how the ancestors called to their children when it was time to come home. He doesn't know about his Apache heritage? No, the adoption records were sealed. All he knows is that he was born in Arizona. But Maria, there's something else. His wife said he's been restless lately, like he's searching for something but doesn't know what. Maria stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the desert stretched toward the mountains. This was the land of her people, the land where her grandmother had taught her to listen to the wind and watch for signs. Maybe the signs had been there all along, and she just needed to learn how to see them. "What do I do now?" she asked. "That's up to you. I can arrange a meeting if you want. But Maria, you need to be prepared. He might not want to see you. He might be angry. 32 years is a long time." Maria understood. She had thought about this possibility every day for 3 decades. The anger, the questions, the hurt. She had prepared herself for all of it. But she had also prepared herself for the other possibility, that maybe, just maybe, he had been looking for her too. "I want to meet him," she said firmly. "Are you sure? Once we start this, there's no going back. I've been going forward for 32 years without him. I think it's time to try going back." After Detective Rivera hung up, Maria sat in her kitchen for a long time. The photograph was still on the table. She picked it up and looked at her young face, so scared and uncertain. That girl had made an impossible choice. She was unmarried, barely out of high school, with no money and no support. Her own parents had been ashamed, had pushed her to give the baby away. "It's for the best," her mother had said. "You're too young. You can't give him what he needs." Maria had believed them then. She was just a kid herself, frightened and alone. The adoptive parents seemed perfect, college-educated, financially stable, eager for a child. They promised to love him and give him opportunities she never could. But signing those papers had felt like tearing her heart in half. She got up and walked to her bedroom closet. On the top shelf, in a box she never opened, were all the things she had saved over the years. Birthday cards she had bought but never sent. Christmas presents she had wrapped but never given. School supplies for each grade he would have been in. She had marked every birthday, every holiday, every milestone in her mind. Her job at the school had been no accident. Every troubled boy who came to her office reminded her of the son she had given away. She wondered if he had struggled in school, if he had felt different or lost, if he had needed someone to talk to and she hadn't been there. But Detective Rivera said he had done well. College graduate, good job, married to someone he loved. Maybe his adoptive parents had been right. Maybe they had given him things she couldn't have. Still, that didn't stop the ache in her chest or the questions that kept her awake at night. What did he look like now? Did he have her eyes? Her stubborn streak? Did he like the same foods? Did he ever wonder about her? Maria walked outside to her small garden. She grew traditional plants here: sage, cedar, corn, beans. Her grandmother had taught her that plants remember their people, just like people remember their roots. Maybe Jake's dreams were his way of remembering. She thought about calling her sister Rosa, the only family member who had supported her decision to search for Jake. But Rosa lived in California now, busy with her own children and grandchildren. This was something Maria needed to figure out on her own. The sun was getting higher and soon she would need to leave for work. There would be children to counsel, parents to meet with, paperwork to complete. But for now, she just stood in her garden and imagined what it would be like to see her son again. Would he be tall? Detective Rivera hadn't mentioned his height. Would he have her hands, her way of tilting his head when he was thinking? Would he look at her and see the family, resemblance, or would she be a stranger to him? The fear was almost as strong as the hope. What if he rejected her? What if he was angry that she had given him away? What if he was happy with his life and didn't want her in it? But what if he did want to know her? What if he had questions only she could answer? What if he wanted to learn about his Apache heritage, about the grandmother who had passed down stories and traditions? Maria touched the turquoise necklace at her throat. It had belonged to her grandmother, and her great-grandmother before that. She had always planned to give it to her children, to pass down the family traditions. Maybe it wasn't too late for that. She went back inside and called her principal to let him know she might need some time off in the coming weeks. She didn't explain why. That conversation would come later, after she knew how Jake felt about meeting her. Then she sat down at her kitchen table and did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote a letter. Not to Jake, she wasn't ready for that yet, but to her 17-year-old self, the frightened girl in the photograph. "You did the best you could," she wrote. "You loved him enough to want what was best for him, even when it broke your heart. Now maybe it's time to see if what's best for him includes knowing where he came from." She folded the letter and put it in the box with all the other unsent messages. Tomorrow, Detective Rivera would call with more details about how to arrange a meeting. Tomorrow, she would start figuring out what to say to the son she had never stopped loving. But today, she would go to work and help other people's children, just like she had been doing for years. The difference was that now, for the first time in 32 years, she had hope that someday soon she might help her own child too. As she got ready for work, Maria looked in the mirror. She saw a middle-aged woman with graying hair and lines around her eyes. She saw someone who had lived through loss and built a meaningful life despite it. She saw strength she hadn't known she possessed when she was 17. Maybe Jake would see those things too. Maybe he would understand that giving him away had been the hardest thing she had ever done, and finding him again was the most important thing she would ever do. The morning was full of possibilities, and for the first time in decades, Maria Delgado was ready to embrace them all. Jake Thompson woke up from the same dream again. The sun was just coming up over Phoenix, painting the bedroom walls golden. Next to him, his wife Lisa was still sleeping peacefully. But Jake's heart was racing like he had been running. In the dream, he was standing in a vast desert. The sand was red and warm under his bare feet. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against an endless sky. An old woman with long gray braids was singing in a language he didn't understand, but somehow felt familiar. When he tried to get closer, to her she would fade away like smoke. "The same dream again?" Lisa asked sleepily, rolling over to face him. Jake nodded and rubbed his eyes. "Every night for the past month, it's starting to weird me out." Lisa sat up and put her hand on his shoulder. She was a practical woman, a nurse who dealt with facts and solutions, but she had learned to take Jake's feelings seriously. "Maybe it means something. My grandmother always said dreams were messages." "Messages from who?" "I don't even know anyone who looks like that old woman, and I've never been to a desert that looks like that." But even as he said it, Jake felt a pull in his chest. Something about the dream felt important, like a puzzle piece that was trying to fit into his life. Jake got up and went to make coffee while Lisa got ready for her shift at the hospital. Their house in Phoenix was modern and comfortable. Jake had done well for himself. Graduated from Arizona State with a computer science degree, worked his way up at a software company, married his college girlfriend. His adoptive parents, David and Carol Thompson, were proud of him. They had given him a good life full of love and opportunities. But lately, that good life felt like it wasn't quite enough. Jake had always known he was adopted. David and Carol had never hidden it from him. They told him his birth parents were very young and wanted him to have a better life than they could provide. They showed him pictures of the day they brought him home from the hospital, beaming with joy and love. "You were wanted," Carol always told him, "by your birth parents who loved you enough to make a hard choice, and by us who had waited so long for you." Growing up, Jake had been curious about his birth parents sometimes. What did they look like? Where did they come from? Did he have brothers and sisters somewhere? But the curiosity had never been urgent. David and Carol were his real parents in every way that mattered. They had been there for every scraped knee, every school play, every graduation. They had taught him to throw a baseball and drive a car and treat people with respect. So why at 32 years old was he suddenly dreaming about deserts and old women singing in unknown languages? At work that morning, Jake tried to focus on the new software project his team was developing. But his mind kept wandering. During his lunch break, he found himself searching online for images of Arizona deserts, trying to find one that matched his dreams. None of them looked quite right, but some came close. His coworker, Ben, noticed him staring at his computer screen. "Planning a vacation?" he asked. "Just looking at some pictures," Jake said, closing the browser quickly. "Everything okay, man? You've seemed distracted lately." Jake had known Ben for 5 years. They had worked on dozens of projects together, grabbed beers after work, been to each other's weddings. If anyone would understand, it would be Ben. "Do you ever feel like something's missing from your life but you can't figure out what it is?" Jake asked. Ben thought about it. "You mean like when I realize I forgot to DVR the game? Or something bigger?" "Something bigger. Like there's a piece of your story that you don't know and it's starting to matter." Ben nodded slowly. "My dad went through something like that when he turned 50. Started researching our family tree. Found out we had relatives in Ireland he never knew about. It became kind of an obsession." "Did it help when he found out about the relatives?" "Yeah, actually. He felt more grounded somehow, like he knew where he came from." Ben paused. "This is about you being adopted, isn't it?" Jake nodded. He had told Ben about his adoption years ago, but they had never talked about it much. It had always just been a fact about Jake's life, not something that needed discussion. "Have you ever thought about looking for your birth parents?" Ben asked. "Not really. My parents, my adoptive parents, they're amazing. I never felt like I needed anyone else. But now you do?" Jake thought about the dreams, about the feeling of restlessness that had been growing stronger every week. "I don't know if I need them exactly, but I think I need to know about them. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. What does Lisa think?" "I haven't told her about wanting to search, just about the dreams." That evening, Jake brought up the subject with Lisa over dinner. She listened carefully as he explained his growing curiosity about his birth parents and his heritage. "What's holding you back?" she asked. "I don't want to hurt my parents," What if they think I'm not grateful for everything they gave me? Lisa reached across the table and took his hand. Jake, you're their son. They love you. They want you to be happy and whole. If knowing about your birth family would help with that, they'll support you. What if I find out something bad? What if my birth parents were criminals or drug addicts or something? What if they were teachers or doctors or artists? You can't let fear of the worst-case scenario stop you from finding answers to questions that are clearly eating at you. Jake squeezed her hand. Lisa had a way of cutting through his overthinking and getting to the heart of things. There's something else, he said. In my dreams, everything feels Native American, I guess. The landscape, the woman singing, even the way the light looks. What if that's part of my heritage? That would be amazing, Lisa said. Think about how much history and culture you might be connected to. That night, Jake called his adoptive parents. Carol answered the phone, happy to hear from him as always. Mom, he said, I've been having some dreams lately and they've got me thinking about my birth parents. Would it hurt your feelings if I tried to find out more about them? There was a pause, and Jake held his breath. Oh, honey, Carol said, finally. Your dad and I have been waiting for this conversation for years. We always wondered if you'd want to know more, and we hoped you'd feel comfortable coming to us when you did. Really? You're not upset? Of course not. You have every right to know where you came from. In fact, I still have the contact information for the adoption agency. I kept it all these years just in case. Jake felt a wave of relief and love for the woman who had raised him. Thanks, Mom. I love you. We love you too. And Jake? No matter what you find out, nothing changes the fact that you're our son, and we're proud of you. The next morning, Jake called the adoption agency. The woman on the phone was helpful but explained that Arizona's adoption laws made it difficult to access sealed records. She could help him register with the state's reunion registry, but unless his birth parents had also registered, there wouldn't be much she could do. However, she said, there are private investigators who specialize in adoption searches. They sometimes have better luck. Jake wrote down the names of several investigators she recommended. His hands were shaking slightly as he hung up the phone. This was really happening. After 32 years, he was going to try to find the people who had given him life. That weekend, Jake and Lisa drove out to Sedona, a small town north of Phoenix known for its red rock formations and spiritual atmosphere. Jake had suggested the trip on impulse, saying he needed to clear his head and think. As they hiked through the desert landscape, Jake felt something shift inside him. The red rocks, the wide sky, the way the light fell across the canyon walls. It all felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain. It reminded him of his dreams. But more than that, it felt like home. This place is incredible, Lisa said, stopping to take pictures of the rock formations. Jake nodded, but he was lost in his own thoughts. He felt connected to this land in a way that surprised him. He had grown up in Phoenix, but the city felt different from this ancient desert. This felt like something deeper, something that called to his blood. They found a quiet spot to sit and eat their lunch. Jake looked out over the red rocks and made a decision. I'm going to hire a private investigator, he said. Lisa smiled. I think that's a great idea. What changed your mind? Jake gestured at the landscape around them. This place. It feels like somewhere I belong, but I don't know why. I think maybe understanding my birth family will help me understand that feeling. Even if it's complicated, I need to know. That evening, back in Phoenix, Jake researched the private investigators the adoption agency had recommended. One name stood out, Detective Rivera, who specialized in Native American adoption cases. Jake's instinct about his heritage might be right after all. He composed an email to Detective Rivera, explaining his situation and asking for help. Before he could second-guess himself, he hit send. 3 days later, Detective Rivera called. Jake, I think I can help you, she said. I've already found some promising leads, but I need to ask you something first. Are you prepared for whatever we might find? Sometimes these searches don't end the way people hope they will. Jake thought about his dreams, about the old woman singing in the desert, about the feeling that part of his story was missing. "I'm prepared," he said. "I need to know who I am. Then let's find your family." The coffee shop Detective Rivera had chosen was small and quiet, tucked away in a corner of Scottsdale that most tourists never found. Maria arrived 20 minutes early, even though she had been driving around the block for an hour, too nervous to go inside. She had changed clothes 3 times that morning. "What did you wear to meet the son you gave away 32 years ago?" She finally settled on a simple blue dress and the turquoise necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. Her hands shook as she fastened the clasp. Now she sat at a corner table, clutching a manila envelope that contained everything she had brought to show Jake. Old photographs, the hospital bracelet from when he was born, a letter she had written him on his 18th birthday, but never sent. Her coffee grew cold as she watched the door. Detective Rivera had arranged everything carefully. Jake thought he was meeting with a genealogy specialist who had information about his heritage. It was better this way, Rivera had explained. Less pressure, less chance that he would run away before hearing the whole story. "He's been having dreams," Rivera had told Maria during their phone call the week before. "Dreams about desert landscapes and Native American ceremonies. His wife says he's been restless, searching for something he can't name." Maria had smiled through her tears when she heard that. Her grandmother always said that blood calls to blood, that the ancestors find ways to speak to their children even across great distances. At exactly 2 o'clock, the coffee shop door opened. Maria looked up and felt the world stop spinning. The man who walked in was tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair and strong features. But it was his eyes that made Maria's breath catch in her throat. They were her eyes, dark brown and intense, the same eyes that looked back at her from the mirror every morning, the same eyes that had looked out from her father's face and her grandmother's before that. Jake scanned the coffee shop, clearly looking for someone. When his gaze landed on Maria, he paused for just a moment. Something flickered across his face, confusion, recognition. She couldn't tell which. Detective Rivera had told him to look for a woman in a blue dress with turquoise jewelry. Maria raised her hand slightly, and Jake walked over to her table. "Are you the genealogy specialist?" he asked. Maria's voice stuck in her throat. This was her baby, her son, grown into a man. She had imagined this moment thousands of times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of seeing him. "Please, sit down," she managed to say. Jake sat across from her, and Maria could see him studying her face. His expression was curious, but cautious. "Detective Rivera said you might have information about my heritage," he said. "Something about Native American connections?" Maria nodded, not trusting her voice yet. She opened the manila envelope with trembling hands and pulled out the hospital bracelet from 32 years ago. "This is from the day you were born," she said quietly. "August 15th, 1992, Tucson General Hospital. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Jake stared at the tiny bracelet. It was yellowed with age, but he could still read the information printed on Baby Boy Martinez, the birth mother's last name. "I don't understand," he said, looking up at Maria. "How do you have this?" Maria took a deep breath. This was the moment she had prepared for, dreaded, and longed for all at the same time. "Because I'm your mother," she said softly. "Your birth mother." The words hung in the air between them. Jake's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, something that might have been recognition. He started, then stopped. His eyes never left her face. "My name is Maria Delgado. Maria Martinez when you were born. I wasn't married then. I was 17 years old, scared, and convinced that giving you to a family who could take better care of you was the right thing to do." Jake sat back in his chair, still staring at her. "This is impossible." Rivera said she was setting up a meeting with a genealogy specialist. She is a genealogy specialist in a way, but she's also the private investigator I hired to find you. Maria's voice was getting steadier now that the truth was out. I've been looking for you for 3 years. Before that, I spent 29 years wondering if you were okay, if you were happy, if you ever thought about me. I... Jake shook his head, trying to process what he was hearing. You hired someone to find me? Yes. And when Rivera told me, you had been having dreams about the desert, about Native American ceremonies. Jake, that's your heritage calling to you. Through my family line, you're Apache. San Carlos Apache, to be specific. Jake's eyes widened. Apache? Maria nodded and pulled out a photograph from the envelope. It was an old black and white picture of an elderly woman with long braids, wearing traditional Native American clothing. This is your great-great-grandmother, Elena Delgado. She was a storyteller and a healer. This necklace, Maria touched the turquoise at her throat, belonged to her. It's been passed down through the women in our family for 5 generations. Jake took the photograph with hands that weren't quite steady. She looks like the woman in my dreams, the one who sings in a language I can't understand. Apache. She's singing in Apache. Maria felt tears starting to gather in her eyes. The dreams you've been having, they're not random, Jake. They're your blood remembering where you come from. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Jake studied the photograph while Maria watched his face, trying to memorize every expression. Why now? Jake asked finally. Why did you wait 32 years to look for me? Maria had known this question would come. She had practiced her answer, but sitting here looking at her son, all her prepared words seemed inadequate. Because I was afraid, she said honestly. Afraid that you'd hate me for giving you away. Afraid that you'd be angry that I waited so long. Afraid that you wouldn't want to know me. Are you still afraid? Terrified, Maria admitted, but also hopeful. You're here. You didn't walk away when I told you who I was. Jake set the photograph down on the table. I don't know what I'm feeling right now. This is a lot. I know. I'm sorry for the way Rivera arranged this meeting. We thought it would be easier than a phone call or letter. She lied to me. She protected both of us. If you had known who I was, would you have agreed to meet me? Jake considered this. I don't know. Probably not immediately. I would have needed time to think about it. And I might have lost my nerve if I'd had to wait any longer. Jake looked at her again, really looked at her. Maria could see him taking in her features, comparing them to his own. You have my eyes, he said. You have your great-grandmother's eyes. And your grandfather's hands. She glanced at his hands, resting on the table. Long fingers, good for working with tools or instruments. I play guitar, Jake said automatically, then seemed surprised that he had shared that detail. Your grandfather played fiddle at tribal gatherings. Music runs in the family. What else runs in the family? Maria pulled out more photographs. Relatives Jake had never known existed. Pictures from tribal gatherings and family celebrations. She told him about his grandfather who had been a mechanic and could fix anything with an engine. About his great-aunt who had become a teacher and dedicated her life to preserving Apache language and customs. About cousins who lived on the reservation and in cities across Arizona. You have a large extended family, she said. People who would welcome you if you wanted to meet them. Do they know about me? Some do. My sister Rosa has always known. She lives in California now, but she's the one who encouraged me to start looking for you. A few cousins know too. They've been hoping to meet you someday. Jake was quiet for a long time, looking through the photographs. Maria watched his face and saw moments of recognition, expressions that reminded her so much of her own father and grandmother. What about your parents? Jake asked. My biological grandparents? Maria's expression grew sad. They both passed away several years ago. They weren't supportive when I got pregnant. They were very traditional in some ways, very concerned about what people would think. They pushed me to give you up for adoption. Do you regret it? The question hit Maria like a physical blow. She had asked herself this same question every day for 32 years. I regret that I was too young and scared to fight for you, she said carefully. I regret that I missed your first steps, your first words, your first day of school. I regret every birthday and Christmas and graduation that I wasn't there for. But I don't regret making sure you had parents who could give you the love and opportunities you deserved. Jake nodded slowly. My parents, my adoptive parents, they're good people. They love me. I know they are. Detective Rivera told me about them. I'm grateful to them for raising you, for making you into the good man. You obviously are. How do you know I'm good? Maria smiled through her tears. Because you're here. Because you could have walked away when I told you who I was. But you stayed to listen. Because your wife told Rivera that you help mentor kids at your old high school, and you volunteer at a food bank on weekends. Jake looked surprised. Rivera told you about Lisa? She told me you're married to someone who loves you and supports your search for your heritage. That's all I needed to know. Lisa encouraged me to look for you, for my birth parents. She said I seemed restless lately, like I was searching for something. Were you? Jake thought about the dreams that had been haunting him, about the weeks following their first meeting passed like a careful dance. Jake and Maria talked on the phone twice a week, always at scheduled times, always with clear boundaries. They were both trying to figure out how to build a relationship that had no handbook or roadmap. Jake told Lisa everything about their conversations. She listened patiently as he worked through his complicated feelings about discovering his birth mother after 32 years. She seems nice, Lisa said one evening after Jake had talked to Maria. A little lonely, maybe. She is lonely. She never married, never had other kids. She became a school counselor and spent her career taking care of other people's children. Jake paused. I think I feel guilty about that. Guilty about what? About her spending her whole life alone because she gave me away. What if she could have been happy with someone else if she hadn't been carrying around this sadness about me? Lisa took his hand. Jake, you were a baby. You didn't make any choices about what happened. She made her choices, and apparently helping kids became her calling. That's not your fault or your responsibility. But the guilt was just one of many emotions Jake was struggling with. There was curiosity about his Apache heritage, excitement about having extended family he'd never known about, and underneath it all, a deep anger that surprised him with its intensity. The anger came out during their fourth phone conversation. Tell me about when I was born, Jake had asked. Maria's voice became soft and distant. You were born on a Tuesday morning. It was August, so it was hot even early in the day. I had been in labor for 16 hours. Were you alone? My mother was there, and the social worker from the adoption agency. What about my father? My biological father? There was a long pause. He wasn't there. Where was he? Another pause. Jake, your father was a boy I dated in high school. When I told him I was pregnant, he denied it was his child. His parents sent him to live with relatives in another state. He just left. He was 17 too, Jake. He was scared. That's when the anger hit Jake like a wave. So both of my biological parents just gave up on me? You gave me away and he ran away? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like neither of you wanted me enough to fight for me. Maria was quiet, for so long that Jake thought she had hung up. You're right, she said finally. We were both too young and too scared to fight for you. I'm not going to make excuses for that or ask you to understand it. You have every right to be angry. I am angry, Jake said, surprised by the force of his own emotions. I'm angry that I grew up not knowing where I came from. I'm angry that you waited 32 years to look for me. I'm angry that I have all these dreams and feelings about a culture I was cut off from. I know. Do you? Do you really know what it's like to feel like a piece of your identity is missing? To have dreams about places and people you've never seen but somehow recognize? No, Maria said quietly. I don't know what that's like, but I know what it's like to wonder every single day if your child is safe and happy. I know what it's like to see every dark-haired boy on the street and wonder if he could be you. I know what it's like to buy birthday presents every year and put them in a closet because you have no one to give them to. Jake felt some of his anger deflate, replaced by a different kind of pain. You bought me birthday presents? Every year. Christmas presents too. I know it was stupid, but I couldn't help myself. After that conversation, Jake didn't call Maria for 2 weeks. He needed space to process his emotions and figure out what he really wanted from this relationship. Lisa was patient with his mood swings and late-night pacing sessions. His adoptive parents, David and Carol, listened without judgment when he told them about his anger and confusion. "It's okay to be mad," Carol said during one of their weekly dinners. "You have a right to all of your feelings about this." "But I don't want to hurt her," Jake said. "She's already been through enough." "What do you want?" David asked. "Forget about her feelings for a minute. What do you want from this relationship?" Jake thought about it. "I want to understand where I come from. I want to learn about the Apache side of my heritage. I want to know what my genetic relatives are like, what traits run in the family. And I want to understand her. I want to know what she was, like when she was young, what her life has been like, why she made the choices she made." "Then keep talking to her," Carol said. "But be honest about your feelings. Don't pretend you're not angry when you are." So Jake called Maria back. They had their most difficult conversation yet, but also their most honest one. "I'm angry that you gave me away," Jake said without preamble when Maria answered the phone. "I know you are. And I'm angry that my biological father just disappeared. What was his name, by the way? You never told me." "Roberto Chavez. He went by Bobby. He was on the football team, played guitar in a garage band. He was actually a lot like you in some ways." "Do you know where he is now?" Detective Rivera found him. "He lives in New Mexico, works construction. He's married with 3 kids. Does he know you found me?" Rivera contacted him, but he doesn't want any contact. He said that part of his life is in the past, and he wants to keep it there. Jake felt the anger surge again, but this time, it wasn't directed at Maria. "So he's still running away?" "I'm afraid so." "That's his loss," Jake said, and was surprised to realize he meant it. Over the following weeks, their conversations became easier. Maria started sharing stories about Jake's extended family, about Apache traditions and customs, about the reservation where some of his cousins still lived. "Your great-grandmother Elena was known for her storytelling," Maria said during one call. "She could make the old legends come alive. Children would come from miles around to hear her stories." "What kind of stories?" "Creation stories, stories about the warriors and the animals, stories about how the world came to be the way it is. She believed that stories were how we keep our ancestors alive." "Do you remember any of them?" "Some. I could tell you one if you'd like." Jake found himself looking forward to these calls. Maria would share a story or a piece of family history, and Jake would share details about his current life, his work, his hobbies, his hopes of starting a family with Lisa someday. "You play guitar?" Maria asked when he mentioned his music. "Just as a hobby, I'm not very good." "Your great-grandfather played fiddle. Your Uncle Ramon plays guitar at powwows and tribal celebrations. It's definitely in your blood." "I've been having different dreams lately," Jake mentioned during another call. "Different how?" "Instead of just the old woman singing, now I dream about a whole community. People dancing around a fire, drums beating, everyone wearing traditional clothes. It feels like a celebration." "That sounds like a powwow or a traditional ceremony. Your blood is remembering what it means to be part of the community." These conversations helped, but Jake knew that phone calls could only take them so far. There were still moments of awkwardness, topics they carefully avoided, and a distance that came from 32 years of separation. The breakthrough came when Maria made a suggestion that surprised them both. "Jake, would you and Lisa like to come to dinner at my house? Nothing formal, just a chance to talk in person again. I could cook some traditional Apache foods, show you some more family photos." Jake's first instinct was to say no. Dinner felt too intimate, too much like a family gathering. But then he thought about his dreams, about his growing curiosity about his heritage, about the woman who had carried him for 9 months and then spent 32 years wondering if he was okay. "Let me talk to Lisa," he said. Lisa was immediately enthusiastic about the dinner invitation. "This is good, Jake. You can't build a relationship entirely over the phone. What if it's weird? What if we don't have anything to talk about? Then it's weird for a few hours and you go home. But what if it's not weird? What if you actually enjoy spending time with her? The dinner was scheduled for a Saturday evening. Jake spent the whole day nervous, changing clothes twice and arriving at Maria's house exactly on time. Maria lived in a small adobe house in an older part of Tucson. The front yard was full of desert plants, cactuses, sage, and other native vegetation. Wind chimes made of turquoise and silver hung from the front porch. "This is beautiful," Lisa said as they walked up to the front door. Maria answered their knock wearing a simple dress and the turquoise necklace she had worn to their first meeting. Jake could see that she was nervous too. "Welcome," she said. "Come in, please." The inside of the house was warm and inviting. The walls were decorated with Native American art, paintings, pottery, woven baskets. Photos of family members covered every available surface. "These are all relatives?" Lisa asked, looking at the photos. "Most of them. Some are family friends who are like relatives. In Apache culture, community is very important. People who aren't blood-related can still be considered family." Maria had prepared traditional Apache foods: fry bread, venison stew, corn soup, and wild honey cakes for dessert. As they ate, she told stories about the dishes, about which relatives had taught her the recipes, about the significance of certain foods in Apache culture. "Corn is sacred," she explained. "It represents life and fertility. When Apache children are born, corn pollen is blessed and used in naming ceremonies." "Was I given an Apache name?" Jake asked. 3 months after their first dinner together, Maria called Jake with an invitation that would change everything. "There's a gathering next weekend," she said during one of their regular phone calls. "A celebration for the summer harvest. It's not just our immediate family, it's the whole extended community. Cousins from the reservation, family friends, elders who remember your great-grandmother Elena." Jake felt his heart speed up. "You want me to meet everyone?" "Only if you're ready. I know it's a big step. There will be about 50 people there, maybe more. Traditional foods, storytelling, some ceremonial dancing. It would be a chance for you to see what Apache community life is really like." Jake had been thinking about this moment for weeks. The more he learned about his heritage, the more he wanted to experience it fully. But meeting 50 relatives at once felt overwhelming. "Will they know who I am?" he asked. "Some will. My sister Rosa is flying in from California specifically to meet you. She's been waiting 32 years for this too. And there are cousins who have heard about you and want to welcome you home." "Home?" "Jake, in Apache culture, family is everything. Blood connections matter, but so do the connections we choose to make. If you come to this gathering, you won't just be meeting relatives. You'll be coming home to your people." That night, Jake talked it over with Lisa. They sat on their back porch looking up at the stars over Phoenix. "I'm scared," Jake admitted. "What if they don't accept me? What if I don't fit in? I don't know the language, the customs, the right things to say. What if they love you instantly because you're family?" Lisa countered. "What if you walk in there and finally understand what it feels like to be surrounded by people who share your blood and your history? It's a big risk. The biggest risks usually lead to the biggest rewards." Lisa paused, then added, "Jake, I've watched you change over these past few months. Ever since you started talking to Maria, ever since you began learning about your Apache heritage, you've seemed more complete somehow. Like pieces of yourself that were missing are finally falling into place." Jake knew she was right. The dreams that had once confused him now made sense. The restlessness he had felt for years was quieting as he learned more about his cultural identity. Even his music had changed. He found himself playing songs with Native American influences, rhythms that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his memory. "Okay," he said, "let's do it." The gathering was held at a ranch outside Globe, Arizona, on land that had been in Maria's extended family for 3 generations. As Jake and Lisa drove up the dirt road toward the main house, they could see cars, parked everywhere and smoke rising from cooking fires. "There are so many people," Lisa said, sounding nervous herself now. Jake parked the truck and sat for a moment, gathering his courage. Through the windows he could see groups of people talking, children running around playing, elderly folks sitting in chairs under shade trees. Some people were dressed in traditional Apache clothing, while others wore regular modern clothes. It looked like any family gathering, except these were all people he was related to but had never met. Maria appeared at their car window before they could even get out. "You came," she said, and Jake could see tears in her eyes. "We came," he confirmed. "Are you ready for this?" Jake looked at the scene before him, his extended family, his cultural community, the people who shared his bloodline and his heritage. "As ready as I'll ever be." Maria led them toward a group of people sitting under a large ramada, a traditional Apache shade structure. An elderly woman with long gray braids looked up as they approached. "Rosa," Maria called to her sister. "He's here." Rosa stood up slowly, using a walking cane for support. She was smaller than Maria, with deep lines around her eyes that spoke of a life spent laughing and crying in equal measure. She looked at Jake for a long moment, studying his features. "Ay, Dios mío," she whispered. "You look just like Papa when he was young." She reached up and touched Jake's face with gentle hands. "Mijo, we have been waiting so long to meet you." "It's nice to meet you too," Jake said, surprised by how emotional he felt. "Nice?" Rosa laughed. "Nice is for meeting strangers. This is family, mijo. This is coming home." She turned to Maria. "Look at him, Maria. Look at those hands. Exactly. Like Papa's. And that way he tilts his head when he's listening, just like Mama used to do." Over the next hour, Jake and Lisa were introduced to cousin after cousin, aunt after uncle, family friends who had known his grandparents and great-grandparents. Each introduction came with stories about family resemblances, shared traits, connections, to ancestors. "You have Eduardo's stubborn chin," said one cousin. "Your grandmother's gentle eyes," said another. "The way you stand reminds me of your great-grandfather Miguel." Jake found himself overwhelmed not just by the number of people, but by how warmly he was welcomed. There was no awkwardness, no sense that he was an outsider looking in. These people embraced him immediately and completely, as if he had been part of their lives all along. The gathering included traditional Apache foods that Maria had only told him about: tizwin, a corn-based drink, acorn mush, roasted agave, and various wild plants that had been staples of Apache diet for centuries. Jake tried everything, guided by relatives who explained the cultural significance of each dish. "This acorn mush," explained his cousin Roberto, "this is what kept our ancestors alive during the hard winters. Acorns could be stored for years, ground into flour when other food was scarce." "And this?" said his great-aunt Carmen, pointing to a pot of stew. "This is made from a recipe that goes back 7 generations. Your great-great-grandmother Elena taught it to your grandmother, who taught it to Maria, who will someday teach it to your children." As the afternoon wore on, the formal introductions gave way to more relaxed conversation. Jake found himself sitting with a group of men his age, talking about work, sports, music. They treated him like a cousin they had grown up with rather than a stranger they had just met. "So you play guitar?" asked his cousin Danny. "We've got a family band. Well, sort of a family band. We play at gatherings like this, sometimes at powwows. You should join us." "I'm not that good," Jake protested. "Doesn't matter. It's not about being good, it's about making music with family." Danny disappeared and came back with a guitar. "Play something." Jake felt self-conscious with everyone watching, but he started playing a song he had written recently. A melody that had come to him in his dreams, with rhythms that somehow felt ancient and familiar. As he played, the conversation around him gradually quieted. People stopped what they were doing to listen. When he finished, there was a moment of complete silence. "Where did you learn that song?" asked an elderly man named Thomas, one of the tribal elders. I wrote it. It came to me in a dream." Thomas exchanged glances with several other elders. "That melody, those rhythms, they're very old, traditional. Your ancestors are singing through you, young man." As evening approached, the gathering took on a more ceremonial tone. A fire was built in the center of the area, and people began to gather in a circle around it. Traditional drums appeared, along with rattles and flutes. This is where it gets real, Maria said quietly to Jake. The evening ceremony is about honoring the ancestors, celebrating the harvest, and welcoming new members into the community. New members? You, if you want to be welcomed. It's not required, Jake. You can just watch if you prefer. Jake looked around the circle. These people, his people, were preparing to officially welcome him into their community. All his life, he had felt like something was missing, like he didn't quite fit anywhere. Now he was being offered a chance to belong somewhere completely. I want to be welcomed, he said. The ceremony began with drumming and singing. Jake didn't understand the Apache words, but the emotions they conveyed were universal: gratitude, celebration, connection to the earth and to each other. As the songs continued, Jake felt something shifting inside him, as if pieces of his identity were clicking into place. Then Thomas, the elder who had recognized the traditional elements in Jake's music, stepped forward and began to speak in Apache. Maria translated quietly for Jake. "He's talking about you," she whispered. "He's telling the story of the lost son who has found his way home. He's saying that the ancestors led you back to us through dreams and music." Thomas continued speaking, and his voice grew more emotional. Several people in the circle began to cry. "What's he saying now?" Jake asked. "He's saying that your great-grandmother Elena appeared to him in a dream last week. She told him that her great-great-grandson was coming home, and that the family would be complete again." Jake felt chills run down his spine. He thought about his dreams of the old woman singing, dreams that had started just a few months ago and had led him to search for his birth family. The ceremony continued with individual family members stepping forward to welcome Jake officially. Each person placed their hands on his shoulders or head and spoke words of blessing and acceptance. When it was Maria's turn, she could barely speak through her tears. "Mijo," she said, using the affectionate Spanish term that Rosa had used earlier. "My son. I'm sorry it took so long for you to come home to us, but you're here now and we will never let you go again." Jake felt his own tears starting. "I'm sorry I was angry with you. I understand now why you made the choices you